Okay, so we are going to get started. Thank you everybody again for coming. I'll start off with some quick introductions. So my name is Paul Stas. I'm the Director of Sales here at Strongpoint. I've been with the company for a few years now. I've been in touch with all kinds of customers at different stages. And so I hope to share kind of some valuable information with you today about impact analysis. Just broadly speaking, kind of why is it challenging, why is it important, and how can we help? I have on the line with me today, Rick Rosler. So Rick Rosler is our customer success lead for our Salesforce project or product. Also spends a lot of time working directly with customers, so he typically has real world examples. Rick's kind of my backup for today. If there's anything that's a little bit more technical than what I can handle, he is hopefully the guy. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to drop them in the question box or in the chat. We will hopefully have some time towards the end to answer those, and if we can't today, then we'll make sure to get your answers back to you promptly. So the webinar today is scheduled for 30 minutes. We'll probably spend 5 minutes or so walking through a few slides. What I want to do is just kind of give those that are new to Strongpoint a very brief overview of what we do and how impact analysis fits into that kind of greater suite of products. I'll then talk a little bit more detail about impact analysis, and I'll jump into a product demo, saving time towards the end for questions if there are any that come up. Okay, so without further ado, I will get started. Like I said, I want to start with just a very brief overview. They often say don't talk about product, talk about solutions, but I'm talking about product. If I was going to give you a very quick walkthrough of everything that we do, or a managed package, once installed, we automatically document all your customizations and map out all of their dependencies. We come with a variety of cleanup and optimization tools. If you're running an older, more legacy org with some technical debt, we can definitely help there. A very important part of our solution is our impact analysis, and that's really specifically what we're going to talk about today. And for us, impact analysis is just all about giving your team confidence to make changes quickly and effectively while reducing risk as much as possible. If you're in an organization that requires a more formal change management process with like requests and approvals, we absolutely support that directly from within Salesforce, and we integrate with tools like Jira and ServiceNow. So if you're leaning on those heavily, you can actually perform a lot of the impact analysis that I'll show you today from Jira or ServiceNow. If as part of your release management strategy, you're looking for automated deployment and rollback capabilities, that's absolutely something that we can provide. We also have environment comparison tools so that you can troubleshoot across orgs or troubleshoot across environments, validate that deployments are done successfully, so on and so forth. And if you're in a, let's say, publicly traded with SOX compliance requirements, or working in an industry that is heavily regulated, then we also have some governance tools that can help support you in this process. Things like mapping the audit logs back to the originating change requests, or monitoring for changes to critical data. That's about it. So in a nutshell, that's everything that we do here at Strongpoint. Focusing now more specifically on impact analysis. I love analogies. I've been in touch with some of the people on the phone before, and they probably know that already. And so you hear all kinds of analogies about Salesforce orgs, but the idea here is that the more that you build, the more that you customize, the more difficult that your org becomes to manage. And so I like the analogy of it's like a Jenga tower. It gets more wobbly and more wobbly until it falls over. I've heard it's like a bowl of spaghetti, where you've got all of these things that are interwoven together, and it's kind of just this slippery mess. I've heard it's like a bundle of snakes as well, which sounds a little bit more scary than some spaghetti, but I think you get the idea. The more that you build, the more difficult it becomes to manage, and even small, simple decisions become difficult. And there's a variety of kind of factors that that cause this or exacerbate it. So the first one, the Salesforce space is very competitive. Talent is very hard to come by. So we see employee turnover, we see employee promotions. People that work on big projects end up moving on to other parts of the organization or another organization altogether, and that knowledge capital walks out the door with them. Same thing goes for kind of in-house versus third party. If you use somebody to come in and work with you on a large project and then they finish up their project successfully or unsuccessfully, they then walk away. Or if you've got kind of an ongoing support relationship with a partner, you know, it's really important to still remain somewhat self-sufficient. And so how can you understand what you can change and what you can't change, and pass off only the appropriate projects to other people so that you still maintain some of that work in-house. And then finally, kind of one of the most difficult aspects of it, or contributing factors, you know, to this complexity, is its technical debt, which often comes from just you know, older legacy orgs where at a point in time a project made a ton of sense, it worked really well, or you were leaning on a managed package for something, whatever the case may be. You know, you now have some legacy issues that you're struggling with. So there's a variety of root causes that make impact analysis really important. This is just a few of them. And you know, when it comes to impact analysis, I'll compare it to an iceberg, where you know what you see is just sitting right up at the top of the water. You're only able to see kind of 10% of the challenge, if you will. And I think it's a really good analogy. You know, the example that I like to use all the time is like, can you change a pick list for me? Well, because changing a pick list is actually really easy. But you know, understanding all of the dependencies and the complexity that's going on back kind of behind the scenes is really what makes it challenging. And it's not just about technical risk. I think that's something that's really important when it comes to impact analysis. You know, technical risk is like, I can't change a pick list because it's connected to Apex classes and I could break them. So that's technical risk. But what we also see, and what's equally important, especially in more complex orgs, is organizational risk and regulatory risk. And so what I mean by that is like, you know, if I make a change to a report, I'm not going to break my system. It's not connected to anything. There's no dependencies. There's no technical risk. But what if that report is being used by kind of senior finance folks or senior sales folks, and there's like, you know, a field being used as a filter or something like that, and I make a change to it, and all of a sudden their data is different, and maybe they don't even know it, right? Sometimes that's more scary than breaking something, because if you break it, you know it. But if you've just changed something, then that's a dangerous place to be. And depending on the industry that you work in, that same kind of, you know, thought applies to regulatory risk as well. That, you know, you need to be confident that all of your data is accurate, that your processes are functioning properly, and those things absolutely need to be taken into consideration with respect to performing, you know, effective impact analysis. So, you know, why do it? You know, really simple slide here. You know, an SDLC can take on kind of different shapes depending on every organization, but just broadly speaking, I think the point that we like to drive home here is that the more time that you spend planning and performing impact analysis, you know, the more efficient the rest of the steps can be. So by effectively planning, by effectively allocating the right resources to the right projects, you know, you can not only streamline development, you can streamline release, you can streamline testing, you know, you name it. So impact analysis is about a lot more than planning, because it can have a really positive impact throughout your full cycle. So what am I going to show you today? So we support impact analysis in a variety of ways. We are completely native, and so in a lot of these cases, you'll see today that you can actually kind of customize your views a little bit too, to give your team access to just what they're looking for. And so what I'm going to start off with is by showing you our dependency relationship diagram, which is a visual representation of kind of configuration, customization, and dependencies. I'll show you where all of that information resides, and I'll give you an example of a report that you can create to help you understand dependencies. So that's kind of, you know, what I like to call it's manual impact analysis using really good tools, but you still need to go out and do it. We then have ways to really streamline and automate the impact analysis process for you. You can put in place custom policies or change controls to kind of really highlight what's most important to your org. And then we've got a couple different ways for you to run tests to understand, you know, how risky is this and why is it, and what approvals do I need and what process should I follow. So that's kind of the structure of the demo for today. And so I will jump right into it. Again, if there are any questions that come up along the way, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. or in the questions panel, and we'll make sure to get back to them. So here I am. I'm inside Salesforce or inside Strongpoint. Again, 100% native. What I'm going to start off with is showing you the dependency relationship diagram. So let's say, I love using this example, so I apologize if anybody's seen it already, but let's say somebody asks if you can make 2 changes to pick lists, say on the account object as an example. So I just selected our dependency relationship diagram. I'll come over to this long drop-down list, and in this particular case, what I'll do is select the account object. And so our DRD view will then show you everything that sits on the account object. You can do both custom and standard fields here. And then what you can now do is visually click through and understand dependencies. So this company social media field is the first one that I'll highlight. And if I click through on this, on the far left side here, I'll start over here, API name, the owner, the type, and the date last used. So this is a multi-pick list that's owned by Brian Vera. It was last used in September of 2018. And I can see that there are some dependencies that I need to be aware of, but they're not very complex. So I've got a list view, a report, and a couple layouts here. Overall, pretty simple. Unless these are heavily used or have automation built into them, then I don't think I have anything to be concerned with. So at a high level, this is likely a change that can follow a fast path. It can go to an admin team rather than our team of developers, and it can be done quickly. A different example here, so I'll pull up this maintenance type. So on the surface, this is identical to what we just saw. So this is also a multi-pick list. It's also owned by Brian. It's also on the account object, and it has a very similar date last used, right? So it's, again, coming back to the analogy of the iceberg, where the surface here looks identical. But what's going on kind of back behind the scenes is a much more complex situation. So here we've got links to Apex class. We've got lists to a couple list views and reports, dependencies onto 5 different layouts, an approval process, a workflow rule, so on and so forth, right? So this is a much more complex example. This should not just be done quickly by fast path with the work of admins declaratively. Like there needs to be a much more robust process wrapped around this change to ensure that we don't run into any complications or downtime as a result. So this is our DRD view. You can click downstream on any one of these if you needed to. You can see from here that you can also open up records for any one of these. And so what we can actually do is, or what Strongpoint has done rather, is it's created a customization detail record for each individual component that's inside your system and stores a bunch of relevant information about each of them. So I'll show you that quickly. If you didn't want to use the DRD view to access that information, you can use our Finder tool. And so you can do a fuzzy search, you can do keywords, API name, just pieces of text. You can choose whether or not you want to find dependencies or if there's components from packages. You can filter this by type or who created it or dates that it was created and whatnot. So a variety of kind of ways that you can customize this. But then ultimately, what I just wanted to show you is what one of these customization detail records looks like. So if you're going to go through and do some more research on whether or not you can change something, this is a great place to start. So again, up on the top, we give you the related objects. So you can see the dependencies here. You saw the DRD view there pop up just very briefly. I won't show it again. The metadata subtab over here gives you a bit more relevant information just around like, the owner and the last modified date and things like that. The raw data subtab here will show you kind of more detailed information about the configuration of this particular component. So depending on the type that we're looking at, these fields up top would fill out. And here I'm just looking at the XML code down below. And then what's also really important is that the Strongpoint engine, once up and running, is actually capturing change logs for you. So every time you make a configuration change inside the system, we are capturing it for you. And so a really important thing when looking at impact analysis is having an understanding of like, what was this used for before, where has it been, what has been done, what's been changed, so on and so forth. It is an important part of planning, and I'll just give you a very brief snapshot of a change log here. But the idea is that it's like a time-stamped, date-stamped record, including a full summary and code diff of what's been done in the past. And so this is all put together for you right away. As I said, a really important part of understanding kind of what it is that you're changing is potentially knowing where it has been before. So that's kind of the customization detail records and some of the ways that you can kind of dig in a little bit more. What I also wanted to show you here is what we've called the customization impact search. And so this is just a report that we've built inside Salesforce that's extracting some of the information that we've created. So we have a number of customers, for example, that have really important custom objects. And if ever any of them change, it's a really big deal. You got to get all these other people involved, so on and so forth. And they just like to have visibility to those objects kind of in a very granular way. And so what we've done here is I'm just showing you everything on the account object. Right in the middle there, you're seeing the base record. On the left-hand side, you're seeing every customization that sits on it. The date last used, the date last modified, and then what we've done is also just populated any of the dependencies or some of the key dependencies across the top in these different buckets. And so just getting visibility to this to help understand like what's involved with making some pretty significant changes to an object is a really, really good way to fast track those initial stages of impact analysis with a specific focus on dependencies. So again, another example though of, these are great tools to help you manually do impact analysis. There's tremendous time savings doing it this way over what you would normally be doing. But I know that we can still do a lot better than this. We can streamline this further. So what I wanted to just quickly talk about next is kind of how we can automate some of that impact analysis for you to really save you time and effectively allocate resources and plan for projects. So the first step is really adding intelligence, customizing your own impact analysis tools for your company or your org. So we have policies or change controls. And so what this gives you the ability to do is to specify by type of change, the level of risk or the process that needs to be followed or the approvals that are necessary in order to make a change and actually have it follow the appropriate steps. So we do come with kind of some defaults and best practices to get you running up really quickly. And for example, you can say, any change that's going to impact a scripted object requires full software development lifecycle. I think that makes sense. Or it could say sandbox testing, or it could say change request. Reports and list view changes as an example, that doesn't require as high of a level of change control. Generally speaking, these can just be what we call log changes only, which basically means no approvals required. This isn't significant or risky or material or however you want to look at it. But then Strongpoint's impact analysis tools are intelligent enough to understand that if there's a dependency on a report or list view that's, say, connected to a scripted object, that it will actually fall into the scripted object category. And then that's kind of how we would flag the risk level for you to review. Okay, taking things just one step further, let's say, for example, and this is pretty common, you don't care about your report and list view changes because they're not risky, except for like a small subset of them. Maybe there's some reports that are used by senior sales folks or senior finance folks. And if those change, you need to make sure that it's flagged for an appropriate review somehow. So what you can also do is customize these policies by, for example, adding in customizations to a policy and then having those managed a little bit differently than the rest of them. So you could select, your 5 reports that you really care about, and then they would fall into a different tier. It's a really useful way, and I'll show you what some of this looks like now. So the first tool that I'm going to show you is what we call a process issue. You can almost think of this as like a baby change request. Maybe you're just doing some initial investigation, but you're not, full-blown requesting a change. Or if you rely heavily on a third party and you want to just do a quick check to see if this is something that you can do or if you need to, bring in somebody else. So what you can do for this is, provide a high-level overview of the change, put a particular customization in scope. In this case, I've just selected like a sales report. And then what Strongpoint is automatically going to do is tell you the change level that's required. So it's going to take this, put it through our documentation engine and understand dependencies, and then automatically compare it to your policies to see if everything that it found violates any of them. And if it does, it's going to give you the change level required. We see a lot of customers that basically use this as like a red light, green light. If it's red and it's a change request or a full software development lifecycle or a sandbox testing, it means, okay, I can't do this. think of it as like citizen development, super users, those kinds of things. Those types of users would benefit from this tool, because it means, you know, can I do this right away without taking up anybody else's time? And if the answer is yes, great. And Strongpoint is still going to be capturing a change log for it so that we know that it happened, okay? A much more detailed example here is our full change request. And so here, and this is the stuff that also does integrate with Jira and ServiceNow. So if you are using those platforms, you actually don't even need to come to this screen. You can do it all inside Jira or ServiceNow. If you use any other ticketing systems and it's still relevant for you, you can just kind of insert links manually here. But the idea is the same as the process issue, just generally speaking. What you're going to do is select a couple customizations. And so in this case, what I've done is I've just selected those same two pick lists that we looked at in the DRD. So the company social media field and the maintenance type. And then what Strongpoint's going to do is take that information, run it through our documentation engine, compare it to your policies, and then give you output that advises you on the level of risk and the process that needs to be followed. So in this case, we're seeing that this is a full software development lifecycle. If I scroll down over here, I'm going to see under the approvals tab that there are approvals that are required, and it's telling me, you know, who it is. It tells me what policy is being applied here. So if you had multiple policies or custom policies, you'd quickly be able to say like, oh, wait a minute, this violates our financial reporting policy, and you can go and dig in and it immediately points you in the right direction. In this case, it's just, you know, violated the default one that we have, which basically leads me to believe that it's probably technical risk that's going on. And then what we do is we've got this impact analysis tab, right? And so here, if something could be safely deleted or modified, it would show up here. We can see here that there's no records to show, which means that they both cannot be safely deleted or modified. And so what Strongpoint is putting together is, you know, a summary of risk. So this particular component, this maintenance type, has these warnings against it. There's dependent scripts, dependent workflows, dependent list views and reports. And we saw that in the DRD view when we looked at it earlier, right? There was like 5 different buckets that popped out, and reports and layouts, and there was an Apex class and workflow rules and approvals and so on and so forth. And it gives you a full list of any customizations that could be impacted by it. So it automatically summarizes the dependencies for you. And then this company social media field still falls under the same category, cannot be safely deleted or modified, but it gives a much more simple picture like we saw earlier. You know, this is likely one that could be done by admins, but there are still dependencies that you need to be aware of, right? So this is an example of how we can kind of, you know, I think dramatically streamline the initial impact analysis for you, especially if you're looking at a long list of customizations. You know, we have a number of customers, as an example, who are like running out of fields on heavily customized objects. And so if you're uploading like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 fields, giving you the ability to look at it this way, or building one of the reports that I showed you earlier where you're automatically summarizing things like date last used and any dependencies, you know, that is a way for you to dramatically streamline your impact analysis efforts. Variety of other things that Strongpoint does, deployment, environment comparison, reporting. Happy to walk you through that in more detail at another time, but I will kind of end off on this note and just bring back up the slide that I had up for you previously, where, you know, we talked about you know, your you know, software development lifecycle and the different ways that doing appropriate impact analysis can really streamline the rest of those efforts. You know, having the right tools and the right processes in place to plan effectively not only saves time in all those other steps, it also significantly reduces risk. So we do have a couple questions, so I can start answering those. The first one is, can you help me understand about the components that are included in the impact analysis report that I showed you? So I'm guessing that that is this one here. And so what we've done here, and this is just a report that we have built, you can build your own and report on what we've created as well. So this is customizable. But what we've done is said, I want you to show me everything on the, in this middle row here, everything on the account object. I could have picked any object that I wanted, but I just picked the account object. And so I'm filtering based on this, and it's showing me everything that has the account object as its base record. And then on the far left side here, I'm showing you every customization that is on the account object. So this like company social media field, like I showed you before, is on it somewhere. And then across the top, what I'm highlighting for you are different columns that we would bucket into dependencies. So for example, the company social media field, like we saw earlier, and I seem to have lost it now. I may have filtered something by accident. Oh, there it is. So we're seeing here that there's some extended types and likely a couple reports if it was included. Yeah, so these are the reports that we saw in the DRD view earlier. And so we've just built this, that you can customize this as you see fit, but we're just showing in the columns the different categories of dependencies that we have documented for you. So you'd be able to see like a field on the account object and any workflows that are connected to it, or reports that are using it, or scripts that are running against it, like Apex classes or triggers. So I hope that helps answer your question. The next question is, could you provide a high-level view of how Strongpoint integrates with ServiceNow? Our next couple webinars actually are going to be on Jira and ServiceNow specifically. But the idea is that from your ServiceNow change request or ticket, you can actually automatically open up a change request inside Strongpoint. And then inside ServiceNow, you would be able to select the customizations that are in scope, and you can view this inside ServiceNow. And so the biggest advantage to this is that, a lot of the time Jira and ServiceNow, as an example, will have like stories and explanations of what you're going to do, but there really isn't any technical information about what's involved with making the change. Is it simple? Is it complex? Do we need a developer involved? So on and so forth. And so we provide this information inside the ServiceNow change request, basically to make it more intelligent, if you will. And we can show you the different types of approvals or the process required to follow. So it makes for better conversations very early in the process for you. We're getting a lot of questions. This is great. So either I did a terrible job explaining it, or I've really hit a note with a lot of people. So one of the two. Can we find how many records have a particular field or set of fields? Yes, absolutely. There's a variety of ways that you can do that, but that's definitely something that we support. For the reports listed, does it indicate that the field is used as a report filter field or just referenced in the report? That's a great question too. Rick just did a technical debt webinar for us a few weeks ago. We can make a note to send you a link to that, because Rick gives you a walkthrough on that call of how you can find if it's being used as a filter or not. So that's a great question. And that is something that we support, not in that view that I showed you, but we do have it in a different way. How do we check dependencies on automation is the next question. And it would all be kind of done in this same way. So you would be able to say build a report and filter for your automations, and then look at dependencies against those instead of doing it just against the account object. We've got them all mapped, and it's all inside Salesforce, so you can build and customize those reports however you see fit. The DRD view would work in the same way as well. You would be able to see downstream dependencies against a script if that's what you were looking at, or you could just look for them in the Finder tool as an example. Like if I wanted to just look up all my Apex classes and then click through and see dependencies on each individual record, there's a variety of ways that we can do that as well. We're over time here, but I'm just going to keep going. Maybe this is a good last question. Will we be able to view this webinar post live training? Yes, absolutely. So we will probably, maybe tomorrow morning, just by the time we edit out kind of the 10 minutes of silence at the start, we'll put this up on YouTube, and we will send everybody that has registered for the webinar a link so that you can go through and you can view it. And I think that's it. So 1 minute over, like I said, either I did a bad job explaining, or we've kind of struck a chord with some people. I'll just drive the point home again. If you're looking to improve the way that you are managing change, or enabling change on this platform, we have got answers for you. It's not just about deployment, even though we support that in an automated way. It is also about planning upfront effectively and maintaining visibility to every change that happens inside the org. We've got a really good kind of use case for org governance that we're also going to cover in an upcoming webinar too. So thank you everybody for joining. We will send that out. I'm happy to book some time with any of you to go through any of this in more detail, talk a little bit more about your specific requirements, but we really hope that this was useful, and we do appreciate you dedicating some time to us today.